Thank you very much, Mr. Diabibiro. Very interesting. I think we are all of us who have been curious, I think our curiosity has been substantially satiated. So, Mr. Brown, I mean, Seplat is a big powerhouse for gas. I know we are talking oil, but gas is also very important. And then with the completion of the MPNU transaction, you now become a huge player also for oil. We are talking about accelerating Nigeria's petroleum production. As one of the leading indigenous companies, how is Seplat looking at contributing to this drive?
Thank you for that. Well, let me start off with a thank you to our hosts, the chairman of chairman, which makes him chairman to the power of 2, I think, if you're a maths person. Thanks also, and thanks to Harris Energies and all the group. I also want to start by congratulating, congratulating President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, first of all, and then my esteemed panelists here, Minister of State, Petroleum Resources, CCE, my partner here to my left, the state government, particularly for us, Akwa Ibom State. The reason why I say congratulations and a big thank you as well is that, it's a bit like, have you ever seen Heathrow Airport in the mornings when you see a stack of planes way back, and the air traffic controller has to land all those planes, one every minute? Well, that's what his government did last year. They went through and had an unprecedented 5 divestments, and probably, I think, up to, if you count it, 25 blocks. That's enormous. It's not done elsewhere in the world. So I want to congratulate, well done, landing all of those transactions, because it really is going to transform Nigeria as a real energy powerhouse. Let me just start off by saying, what it means to Seplat, and then what it means to the wider group. So Seplat is a young company. It's maybe not as old as the IOCs. It's a little bit younger than Owando, but it is a relatively new company, and there's lots of new companies. And as a company, it's been operating almost now for 15 years. I think we have drilled over 100 wells. We have put in, this year we'll have 3 gas plants up and running. We put a lot of infrastructure, put a lot of investment into the regions we operate, into our areas of operation, and really, I think, poised us for this I think is a game-changing acquisition for us as Seplat Group in terms of the acquisition of MPNU, which we completed last year. It's also game-changing for Owando in their acquisition. It's a game change for Renaissance. It's game-changing for absolutely everyone. And when the CCE, who called a news conference in October, or a conference in October, and made the statement 1 million barrels extra, 1 million barrels additional. Now I'm trying to work, is that on 1.5 or 1.7 cc? I'm not sure. Is it 2.5 or 2.7? But whatever happens, it's 1 million extra, and that is a requirement of the government to actually access these really amazing resources and create energy security for Nigeria and its people. And we're up to the challenge. All of the indigenous companies who are taking over these assets and the ones that already have them are up for the challenge. I say always, every barrel counts, and every incremental barrel counts. Every incremental molecule of gas counts, and they all add up to this 1 million barrels. So what is Seplat going to do? Well, we took over on the 12th of December, and we've been working very hard on this year's process, which is really about, we've got 200 wells, about 200 wells in operation today at the old MPNU assets. locked in are over 400 wells, right? And we can see what's happened for the previous divestments. The obvious thing to do is to get after the low-hanging fruit, the stock activities, and start to reopen those wells. And that's exactly what we will be doing this year. At the same time is we're putting forward the 5-year plan. And the 5-year plan is really to look at beyond asset integrity, which we do need to take very seriously as a business, as an industry, because these assets are mature and we have to make sure that we continue to operate them safely. But it's really about what is our infill drilling campaign. And the word campaign, our service providers out here will love this. It is a campaign. It's not one well. It's 10, it's 50, it's 100 wells. And what is that over the next 5 years? Then ramp up to production and hit and deliver those million barrels. And then beyond that is exploration. So at the same time, one of the requirements as part of the approvals was to actually come forward with a commitment to exploring. And I think this is the other thing for us as an industry is beyond accessing easier barrels, we actually got to look deeper, look into the areas that the IOCs haven't explored, because it's vast. I want to also add is in terms of gas, because I think gas is really important. You touched on it. I mean, Seplat, we pride ourselves that this year we'll have 850 million scf of operating gas capacity alongside our partner NNPC in 3 gas plants. With the ExxonMobil acquisition, we've actually got some gas developments there, but it's nowhere near scratching the surface of the gas resource. We believe there's at least 14 TCF of gas here, and if we start to touch on the exploration, the team is thinking double that. So really about the gas development, we've got to really focus on a mixture of domestic gas plays, and we're looking at fertilizer plays, we're looking at power and petrochem. Also, we're looking at LNG plays, right? Either supplying to Nigerian LNG or looking at floating LNG. And there's a number of developments like that, such as UTM, et cetera. So what we're looking at is what is the short term, the near term on production gas, and then what is the long term gas plan so we can access that 14 TCF of gas and plus. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Roger. Very robust answer. I think it's a similar journey that we undertook in Hayes Energies. When we took over our asset, we had 30 wells producing. We have tripled that. We have about 100 wells producing now. And that's what we have used to double our production, both oil and gas. So I wish you the very best in this. I think this is just an indication of what is going to happen that will underpin the rejuvenation of Nigerian petroleum industry. So if I come to Mr. Antia, thank you, our EVP. Thinking about NNPC, I think it would be good if we could explore with you some of the strategic imperatives NNPC is looking at around funding all of these developments that are going to come through. You are either a joint venture partner or a PSC holder or other structures. And so you are kind of the spider in the web in all of these assets. So it would be very good to get your perspectives on this.
Thanks, Osa. Appreciate it. Thanks, Hayes Energies, for hosting this inaugural edition of this leadership forum. I particularly am very elated at being here because the opportunity to talk about what's possible in Nigeria is just what I like to do. When I was offered this role a couple months ago, it was one of the shortest and quickest decisions I had to take. Yet again, it was the longest decision I had to take because I had to look at, what is this going to do to my sleep? By the way, I was retired. I retired at 48, and I was just done with the industry. And coming back here to work with NNPC just provides the opportunity to see the entire landscape, and how one can make an impact and leave a legacy of well-doing in the industry. So your question was how do we provide the strategic imperative to move things forward in the industry? The industry itself is in three categories, if I should just be as simple as possible. You know, the upfront planning, the contracting, the preparation to start work, the technology required to get the oil out of the ground, and of course, the security of assets and to get the products over to sales, either FLNG, pipelines to LNG, to sales out of country and all of that. The security of that entire infrastructure, you know, it's very, very imperative, and I like what I see, I like what I met. Very grateful for the Honorable Minister, Mr. President, and of course the essay to the President as well, Mr. Lu, who has been very dexterous in providing the opportunities, you know, to open up the industry. How do we unlock the industry? It's not been done in a while, but really glad I'm in the industry at this time, you know, for such a moment as this. The upfront work is the contracting. How do we make that better? Coming from the other side of the industry to this side of the world, you know, it's always been contracting. Well, three things bedevil the industry when you look at it. It's contracting, it's aged facilities, and it's security. And of course, you know, the last one is funding. The funding part has been solved for the most part. We take care of cash calls. Nobody can put up their hands and say, I owe them cash calls. I just signed the last one 2 days ago for February, you know. So we're doing very well in that area. The money is available. The contracting is evolving. Target is 6 months. We had an SPA with the SLA with the industry, you know, to target 6 months of every contract that leaves the industry to NNPC. There is a bit of struggle from both sides, a bit of tension from both sides, you know. I don't want to blame parties here, but there's an opportunity next month to redefine what that will look like. You know, pilot some and see how we can break that down below 6 months. I am sold into the fact that we can make it happen, and we are definitely going to make it happen because it's just simple business sense. Make things work. Don't spend too long a time in contracting, because if it's too long, prices escalate from when you start the contracting to when you get the projects in place. The other one is making sure we contain the products inside the facilities, inside the pipelines, inside the vessels, and all of that, securing all that product. Honorable Minister talked about the great work that has been done by the military, by the NSA. In recent times, we've transitioned security over to the NSA. You know, NNPC wants to just get off that business and get the people responsible for securing assets to do that. And I'm glad to report that it's working well. The transition has been smooth. The NSA, Mr. No Ribado, has been very, very insistent in ensuring that, you know, the tempo does not drop, and we can ensure we do that. Today, a number of CEOs will attest to the fact that, you know, the availability of pipelines, it's, if not 99%, it's surely in the mid-90s to upper 90s for most assets. There are a few infractions here and there that we're trying to manage, you know, but we think we're taking the market back from the bad actors, you know, to return it to the folks who are really doing well in the markets. Once we can get that security infrastructure stabilized for good across the entire industry, there's a huge pipeline project we have underway to replace our existing pipelines and bring new pipelines with good pressure ratings, you know, that everybody can flow into, you know, and provide technology in the lines as well that can detect an infraction very early, and our response time can be quicker than what it is right now. You know, it will help a lot with the industry. That is being done, and we believe we've got line of sight from here to when we think it's going to be done. The last one is on age facilities. That's a term I want to eradicate from the industry. If we can, actually it's possible to do that. You know, generally as a culture, we don't do very well with maintenance of anything at all, our generators at home, our vehicles, our facilities. When you see the big players manage their facilities, you know it's possible. A lot of us have worked outside of the country, and we do see how a facilities can look as new, even though it's 30 years old, it can still look as though it was a 2-day-old facility. Well maintained, well painted, well taken care of. There is a proactive maintenance, not preventive and lagging issues where it's very expensive to manage. As we change out a lot of these assets and assure that we can keep maintaining them, we'll shift away from that lingo, age facilities, to simply just maintenance. And that transformation is going to happen. My job, as I know, is to be an influencer and to be an enabler in the industry. Like Osa mentioned, joint venture partnerships with a lot of folks, JV level, PSC level, and there's some assets that we run ourselves as NNPC Limited. But I do think there's an opportunity to bring that maintenance culture, take from some of the assets that are doing very well, deploy to assets that are struggling or may not have the resources or the skill sets to do those things. Share as much as possible and see how we can eradicate that term and ensure we've got facilities that will run for the next 10, 20 years. It's not just enough to say we can produce the oil, but we need facilities to keep the oil, contain the oil, and take them to sales. The last one, I think it's the point I'll make is on collaboration. The mindsets that I've met now is where a lot of assets are being hogged by asset owners, I would say, or operators. I would want to see a shift where we collaborate more. The ultimate aim is to produce the fields, get the fields going. And there's no point in keeping an asset when you don't have the capital, you're not ready to produce, and you just hold on to it. How about we bring in third-party folks? You're still the operator, you've got oversight, and you can just give up a little bit of control and watch those assets come alive with production. We share technology in this area, get third-party folks to work in other areas, and just spring up the volumes. So when Commission Chief Executive is talking about plus 2 million barrels in 2021 plus, Honorable Minister is saying 2.7 million barrels by 2027, we are going to have to collaborate. Everybody will need to collaborate. Everybody will focus on what they do best, and the ones they don't have the capital or the resources for, let those who can operate it on a cost-plus basis come do the work. At the end of the day, everybody benefits. We unlock the oil. Everybody goes to the bank. I told Roger the other day, my job is to make him money. My job is to make the CEOs money and to make sure you produce your assets as safely as possible, bank the volumes, and everybody holds an AGM smiling. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I think that's an exciting closer. Smiling, AGMs with everybody smiling. We're looking forward to that. And I think a key message on collaboration is very vital. But let's look beyond 2.7 million barrels. There are so many forces at play. Energy transition. There's development in that space now. There is gas as a transition fuel. There's our power requirements, which is huge. We don't have enough gas. There are so many things raging. So if we look beyond 2.7 million barrels, Honorable Minister, how is government looking at securing this country energy-wise? What is the long-term play for energy?
Thank you very much. Before I address that question, let me first of all, say that today we are doing about 1.75, 1.8 million barrels a day, but we are not exceeding OPEC quota. OPEC quota is 1.5 million barrels of crude. I've been briefed that what we produce,
Crude and condensate.
that we even categorize as crude today, is more of condensate. So I'm looking forward to engaging, the stakeholders so that we dedicate, in our terminals, some reservoirs specifically for condensate. And except the brief is wrong, I believe that even if we do 2.5 million barrels, we may not be exceeding OPEC quota. I hear that we produce substantial volume of condensate. As of today, is mixed together with crude. By the way, condensate is also high-grade crude. I've been told that it's even more expensive than crude. And so condensate is also crude. But we as a country have to engage, the operators of the terminals. Our terminals are owned by Shell, Chevron, all those big boys. So we need to engage them to say, look, let's dedicate some of, our reservoirs for condensate exclusively, or that's for crude, so that we do not violate, our obligation, to OPEC. OPEC is basically about price stability and, efficient, supply chains. It's not enough for us to produce 3 million barrels and then the price of crude comes down to, $40. It won't be attractive. It won't be, in our strategic, national interest. And I've told people that whether Trump is there in America as president or not, the price of crude will not come down. Because those who are actually, the big companies in the US are also there to make money. These are not government-owned companies. They are privately owned companies that are there, to make money. Having said that, let me say that, there is this misconception about energy transition. Historically, no source of energy has been abandoned. Today, between America and then, China, they contribute 55% of global emissions. Where are they coming from? Substantially from coal and fossil fuel. But these guys are not stopping. Whereas they are telling us to stop fossil fuel in investment, they are not stopping. Even if they are making electric cars, the factories where the electric cars are being made are powered by coal or fossil fuel. So the emissions are continuing. So at the global stage, my contention has always been, and the contention of Africa, is that the entire African continent contributes only about 3%. UK alone contribute about 4.8%. But UK too, in 2023 November, gave over 100 licenses for new explorations in fossil fuel. Whereas the West is telling us, to stop production of fossil fuel, they are ramping up production of fossil fuel. So I want Nigerians to know, I want Africans to know that this is basically geopolitics. Nobody is stopping. And for Africa, we've taken a lot more steps than most parts in the world. In Nigeria, we have a law on climate change. We have, taken, gas as a transition fuel. We have robust penalties, for gas flaring. We're doing everything to ensure that, our production in line with the PIA is kept clean, green, and environmentally, sustainable. But our first objective is to solve our energy poverty problems. And I've always told people that we need, the dollars from fossil fuel investment to finance our energy mix. What the West has always said is that they have money that they are going to give to us. The money hasn't come. Since the Paris Agreement, they've always pledged $100 billion a year. Check the records. No promise is a debt. If they don't give you the money, you can't enforce it. And that is why we'll go from one COP 28 to COP 29. The story is the same. They are not giving us any money. The last time I was in Davos, I was in a panel with 6 ministers from, several parts of the world. And I told them that what we need in Nigeria is investment and not loans. We already have enough loans. So why do you want to give us more loans to finance, cleaner energy? We want to be allowed, to continue with our oil, fossil fuel exploration so that we can raise money to finance, our solar energy and wind energy and other sources of energy. But They are proposing to give you loans so that they can continue to enslave us. We've told them that, look, we're not interested. We have enough legal framework to be able to explore, fossil fuel in a cleaner and cleaner way, and that is the way Africa should do. Africa alone has enough market. But the mistake we always make is that the West will give us, the aid needed, to finance the energy mix. Let them bring the aid. Let us see the aid. If you want to give me a free gift, if AS only wants to give me a free gift, give me. But that shouldn't stop me from continuing with the investments we already have. Nigeria and other African countries have substantial investment already in oil and gas. We need to continue along that trajectory, raise the money we need to finance our energy mix. The assurance I want to give to you is that, look, we have resolved that our problem is funding, and that is why between Apple and Afro-Exim Bank, we came up with the idea of African Energy Bank. So that we'll be able to, create a bank that will make money available for Africans to be able to, finance our energy, investments. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Very robust. It's a lot of hope and optimism for the future generations who have these questions in their mind. If I come to the CC, sir, our pipelines had a number of issues. Security was the first line issue, and as we've heard from both the Honorable Minister and from NNPC, a lot of work has been done and is being done to ensure it is secured. Another challenge with the pipelines, particularly now as we have multiple injectors coming into it, is the issue of metering and production allocation. This sits squarely in the remit of your commission, sir. So it will be good for us as operators, because there are lots of people here and people online, to hear how NUPRC is approaching the improvement and the robustness of the mechanisms around metering and production allocation.
Thank you very much. Let me start by saying that the NUPRC has been driving the initiative to ensure that the nation achieves transparency in hydrocarbon accounting as an initiative of, as part of the provisions of the Petroleum Industry Act. As a matter of fact, as part of the statutory mandate of the Commission under the Petroleum Industry Act, the Commission is expected to ensure accurate measurement of hydrocarbon resources. So it's a statutory prescription under the PIA. And the Commission, in furtherance of that, in compliance with that provisions of the Petroleum Industry Act, has put in place two critical regulations. One is the Nigerian Upstream Petroleum Measurement Regulation. And that regulation is a landmark regulation in over 7 decades of exploration and production. So the regulation is targeted at ensuring that we achieve, like I said, transparency in our hydrocarbon measurement in a manner that while we are making effort collaboratively as an industry to ramp up production, that we should equally ensure that is reduction in leakages, because there is no point making effort to increase, optimize production without equally taking corresponding effort in reducing, that is the losses. So that is what that regulation is targeted at. And I'm happy to say that as we speak, that regulation is designed in 2 phases. That is, phase 1 is to carry out engineering integrity audit of the metering facilities we have in the industry. So the Commission has taken bold steps to ensure that we secure Federal Executive Council approval for the implementation of that, of the first phase. And in fact, as I speak, the implementation of that phase is almost 99% completed. So in effect, we have attained almost 99% completion stage of the first phase of implementation of the measurement regulation. Also, we equally have, the Commission has equally embarked on the implementation of the advanced cargo implementation. So the objective of advanced cargo implementation is to ensure that the nation can track every molecule of every barrel of crude that is loaded from our crude terminals up to the discharge point. And don't forget that this issue has been, it has been a challenge, of course, to the industry from inception in a manner that it has been a matter of concern that we do not, as a nation, able to actually track crude discharge to the discharge point. But as we speak, I'm equally very, happy to announce, at least purpose of the audience here, that the implementation of the first phase of the advanced cargo regulation again is almost 100% completed. As a matter of fact, from the demo, we can now see from the terminal to the discharge point. So we'll soon make a public launch of that in NUPRC. So for us, that is a huge achievement. And yes. And the issue of contention as to the difference between the loaded volumes and discharge point, of course, will become a thing of the past by the time we begin a full implementation of the second stage of the laudable initiative. So by and large, of course, while the Commission is not directly involved in the kinetic aspect, like one of the panel speakers has said, that has been yielded to the NNPC, the Office of the National Security Advisor is now directly implementing, supervising the implementation of the kinetic aspect of prevention of crude oil theft and vandalization. We encourage, that is cluster development in a manner to address infrastructural challenge. So we are going to come up with initiative in which development will be done in clusters, to leverage economies of scale. So all these are a mixed bag of activities that the Commission is embarking on, at least to ensure that we meet our targeted production. Thank you.
Thank you, JCC. Very robust outline of the building blocks for the future. Mr. NNPC, you are wearing many hats right now. The OPEC chairman of the board of governors, first ENP CEO, used to be the erstwhile chairman of IPPG, and your business has a key role in the Renaissance portfolio. But let's first talk about your role in the OPEC board of governors. So we are not sure whether maybe you are the first industry person to be in that role, but definitely the first in the past, in recent times, to the knowledge of most of us. So there's a lot of curiosity. What is the job about, and how are you finding it? And then, in light of that, how is Nigeria interest being projected in OPEC, particularly in context of getting the quotas that is going to be necessary for us to produce the volumes that we aspire to produce?
Thank you, sir. I think first, let me just thank Here's Energies for this forum. It's apt It's early in the year, and it's about how do we grow production. So a big thank you to the HERS Group, but also to HERS Energy for enabling this kind of event. And that's why you see all of us participating, because we're hugely interested in getting production up, because that's probably, if you have to think of the key factors that can drive this country's economy, we need oil to get out of oil, and we need the oil revenues as well. So I think the beauty of being new into OPEC is to let everyone know that actually OPEC and Nigeria has a framework. On this panel, OPEC has a conference, which is the leadership end of OPEC, that has delegations, mainly ministers, and the head of delegation, who is the head of the OPEC framework in Nigeria, is seated on my right, Honorable Minister Heineken Lokobiri. And that structure is probably the most important structure because they take the big decisions. As an OPEC governor, you represent Nigeria and see it as a company. OPEC has a secretariat that does all the things you hear about. Demand and supply balance, a massive secretariat in Vienna. But that secretariat needs a board of governors to help make sure their affairs are well governed. And when they're well governed, they can make presentations to the conference where our Honorable Minister sits. And I think it's important to let everyone know how that structure works. Yes, I've been announced as OPEC governor for Nigeria, and in 2025, Nigeria holds the chairman's role. But if I also add a few things, the OPEC structure in Nigeria is actually quite robust. It holds the legs of the Ministry of Petroleum Oil. It holds the leg of the regulator, both the Commission and the authority. So another key participant in OPEC is CCE, who sits here. Also, the National Oil Company is a key stakeholder in the OPEC structure of Nigeria. And then also all of you, because you have to demonstrate the production so that we can get the quota we're looking for. So I thought it would be useful to just share this. So everyone talks about, am I the first? I don't know. But myself and the minister, myself and CC, I said, I'm probably the bridge between the public sector of the oil and gas industry and the private sector. And I think I've been chosen to make sure that bridge works. Because there's no use getting quota if we cannot contribute to production. So for me, it's an honor to represent this country. I think OPEC is a unique organization, especially in these times. So when you ask me what is my role, chairman of a board. The board sits so many times a year. The company, the secretariat, does all the magic they do, but they can't approve them. They need the board. And the board is made up of all member countries who are members of OPEC. And my job is to chair that group and to make sure that the agenda for that group fits the important things for OPEC. And ultimately, I have to also make sure that those things that have to go to conference is well done. But I can't do that without talking to the home front. So I'm in constant discussions with our head of delegation, Honorable Minister, but also importantly, NNPC and CC, and also NMDPRA. So in a nutshell, that's a job, to play that chairman's role, but also to represent Nigeria. And I'll come back to that, which is, how do we get our quota? I think the important thing we should understand is that with Nigeria's reserves and resource base, we don't have any business being below 2 million barrels a day. Nigeria should be 2.5, 3, 4 million barrels a day with our resource base. And I'm talking of oil, and we can do it. So, and I do believe that even those in OPEC and around the world believe that, but we have to demonstrate that we can actually produce that. What happened in January is a major demonstration. Our OPEC quota was 1.5, but we demonstrated that we can deliver above 1.5. I think that's the beginning of giving confidence that we can get more quota. The second one is we do have our issues around stable production. You've heard from the Honorable Minister, you've heard from the CC, all the things they're working on. I typically call it the above ground risk. I think you can say that our subsurface, I don't want to say it's easy, but it's one of the easier hydrocarbon basins in the world. I mean, where do you find you drill one well and you go through stacks of reservoirs and a well can make 5,000, 10,000 barrels a day? Where do you find that? So clearly, we've been blessed with the subsurface. I think the challenge we faced over the last 10, 15 years is the above ground risk, either the insecurity, the social performance that we need to work on. So I'm clear that with Nigeria setting a production level of 2.1 million barrels a day, the job I have as the governor of OPEC, working with the structure of OPEC in Nigeria, is how do we make sure that our quota is at that level? Because we should not be producing above our quota in the wrong way. But once you have to get that quota, I think the next job is to talk to my colleagues. So I put on the second cap. How do we meet that production level? How do we grow production in the smallest marginal fields, in the joint ventures, in the PSCs, in the deep water? How do we do all of that? And I think that's probably one of the things I bring to this job, where I can see both and I can potentially enable an engagement to happen. We had a fantastic discussion yesterday called by the CC around how we meet not just what the upstream requires, but also what the midstream requires. And in the meeting several times, he didn't call me MD or first TMP, he kept on calling me Chairman Board of Governors. And I think he did it actually quite well, because each time I had to make sure I was clear which cap I was wearing. But that's the job. And I think the last part of the question, Tosa, that you asked is, what does OPEC mean for Nigeria and our production aspirations? Oil and gas is international business. And it requires a collegiate group of people who will look at where is the balance between demand and supply. And OPEC's job is playing that responsibility and playing it well. You may have heard of OPEC, but you've also heard of OPEC Plus. Recently, I think later part of last week or this week, Brazil became one of the OPEC Plus members. So you're beginning to see large countries who produce being part of this. Russia is part of it, and I can name a few others who are part of the non-OPEC group. So it's turning into a group of people who will make sure there's a balance between supply and demand over the long term. And they have a long-term view, which impacts pricing. Most of us need pricing not too high, but not too low at the right price, and OPEC plays that role. And one thing that people don't also understand that OPEC takes a responsibility is the emissions reduction. They haven't thrown it away. They also have a responsible agenda to make sure that the oil that we produce does not create over emissions in the world as we go forward.